Hello, everybody. I'm Eureka John, and thanks for joining in another episode of Metaverse Thinktank. And this is episode number 2. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about MetaFi. In episode number 1, we talked about the introduction of the Metaverse, and we just covered all the basic concepts of the Metaverse. However, this time we're going to go a little deeper. The Metaverse has been catching on since last time we recorded. Now even Facebook has incorporated the Metaverse, and they've changed their name to Meta. So they've kind of, in a way, created, they're trying to be the Coca-Cola of the Metaverse and have everybody refer to the Metaverse and have Facebook be synonymous with that. However, the beauty about the Metaverse and the beauty about it being open and transparent and built on the Ethereum blockchain is that you can't own the Metaverse. It is a concept. It is something transparent and big and open and for everybody. And one company just can't come in and take control and own it. So the beauty, though, is Meta, the Facebook company, is being built on top of the Ethereum blockchain. So it is still subject to the open rules of the Ethereum blockchain and the network. So anyway, today we have Camilo Echeverri and Nicolas Weber, who have also started this Metaverse think tank with me. And they're with the co-founders of the MGH DAO, and the MGH DAO is all about land valuation. And if you've played in Decentraland, if you've played in Sandbox, if you've played in Somnium Space, you have a character and you go in that world and there is land in that world. And that land can be worth something. And how do you value all those NFTs in that meta space? Well, they're here to answer this question, and this is where MetaFi comes into play. So thank you guys for jumping on. Let's talk about decentralization first, and decentralization in finance and DeFi. I'd like to get your opinion and kind of introduce people to the concepts of DeFi, because I think it's a great starting point to be able to understand MetaFi if you kind of understand what DeFi is first.
In a nutshell, like I would say that DeFi, right, is jettisoning intermediaries in the space of finance, and therefore, doing this by, on the one hand, adding a layer of transparency, and on the other hand, also adding, the sense where code is the law, right, where you're not reliant on centralized intermediaries that are doing transactions behind closed doors, and these type of things that are just, on the one hand, inefficient, that are intransparent, and that are just something that's just benefiting a few, but not everyone, right? And when it comes to DeFi, right, every transaction is on chain. It's not so much a magic, right? There may be here and there, obviously more yield associated to it, especially right now, more financial advice, of course. But in a nutshell, it's still like finance, right? So it's just like the decentralization of the entire finance sector, and therefore leveraging the same tools, right, like loans and these type of aspects, but without having to go to a bank to obtain that loan, but actually obtaining that loan, so to say, from a decentralized protocol where everything is reliant on the code itself, right? I mean, there's crazy things like flash loans and stuff like that, which is a bit exotic, and that's more like a niche within DeFi, right, in that sense. But generally, DeFi is just finance in a more decentralized form without the intermediaries. But sorry, Camilo, go ahead. I'm sure you have some important aspects also to add.
Thank you, Nico. So yeah, I mean, what I would add to that is actually the beauty of DeFi, and the beauty of the blockchain itself, in that it's permissionless, right? So you have these protocols like Uniswap where you can just trade any asset pretty much, and you can just shut it down, right? And I think that's super beautiful and inspiring as well. And to understand DeFi, I think it's good to actually go back to the beginnings of how everything started. One thing that is important is, that changed the whole spectrum of how we view finance and value transfer is Bitcoin, right? Which allows us to actually permissionlessly and transfer value in a decentralized way, right? And then what happened after that was Ethereum, that allowed us to actually embed logic into that value transfer. So that's pretty much like the key for DeFi, right? Like adding just logic to that value transfer to actually do whatever you want to do, things that you used to do in like the regular financial market, right? Like getting a loan or trading assets and so on. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it's adding the smart contracts on top of the blockchain, adding that logic logic to the value transfer. That's like the key thing, and taking out the intermediaries. And I know I've mentioned it that of selling a car or buying a car, you always have that sales guy going back and forth to the manager and the underwriter and everybody always talking behind closed doors. That doesn't happen in decentralized finance. And so you take some of these concepts and it allows you to kind of have a launch pad to begin to understand the beginnings of MetaFi. But MetaFi goes well beyond this once you start stepping into the metaverse. So what are some of the key similarities and differences here?
I mean, generally, uh, MetaFi, I would define it as a niche within decentralized finance, right? It's not something that's, let's say, competing with DeFi, right? It's solely that niche. And here, from my perspective, if you look at the DeFi space, there's different aspects here. There's on the one hand the aspect of institutional DeFi, for instance, where institutions are leveraging DeFi. There's on the other hand just, let's say, the traditional DeFi, which sounds a bit weird, but it's like where you just, let's say, take ETH and you collateralize it, for instance, in MakerDAO, and then you obtain a loan for this and DAI. And then on the other hand, there's, for instance, another niche called MetaFi, right, which is the convergence of decentralized finance on the one hand, as well as the metaverse-based assets, which are more or less, apart from, let's say, for instance, projects like Boson Protocol, which are integrating real-world assets into the metaverse, it's mostly digital-only assets, right? And these digital-only assets, obviously, right now at least, they don't have the same kind of price transparency and pricing mechanisms as let's say, ETH, right, which is trading on a secondary market. And therefore, MetaFi is still very much in the early stages. And this is also where we at MGH want to come in and, provide a bit more, or not a bit, but generally transparency and fair pricing mechanisms to this market. And, MetaFi is therefore, something which is as of now a bit still overlooked, I would say, in this whole metaverse trend, because I mean everyone is just about the respective native currencies or tokens, so to say, of the respective metaverses, or everyone is talking about Facebook. But adding that financial layer, actually, which is obviously that MetaFi term, then is really going to be a huge value, because it can be data, it can be generally NFTs, which are virtual real estate, it can be any form of value. And how we approach this, maybe, I don't know, Camilo, you want to provide some more insights on this?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, when people talk about like all those tokens and cryptocurrencies, they think it's just like a regular means of like transferring money, right? So, but as Nico mentioned, there are many more things to it, right? And given the fact that the internet is globally native in that regard, I think that being able to offer like those that infrastructure to actually transfer value in a better way is key and will unlock like a lot of value in the coming years. So regarding what we do at MGH, we really want to increase the price transparency of like the NFT world, right? So the NFT world is fairly big, and the main problem of it is that it doesn't really have, or there are not many means on how to value those assets, right? So we thought when we started like this project, we thought, okay, which of all these NFTs are like easier to value? And we thought, okay, virtual lands, there could be some similarities between the real world or the real estate market and the virtual real world. So we started investigating and looking, okay, how about like the coordinates of a land? In which neighborhood is it? How many times has it been sold and stuff like that? So all of those proxies pretty much we were able to find them in these virtual worlds, and that's why we started developing a pricing algorithm for it. So the idea is to actually have this algorithm that fairly prices lands. I mean, if we take a look at the NFT market, we always see the floor price, right? And we think, okay, the floor price should be like the price that we have to accept because it's the lowest that somebody's offering an asset. But at the end of the day, it's only that person thinking, okay, this is the amount of money I want to get for this asset. It doesn't really mean that that's the fair value for that asset, if you know what I mean. So that's one thing that we are like trying to improve with MGH, and it's actually allow people to fairly value their assets, and that will pretty much regulate the market, bring more efficiency and transparency, right? Because people will know, okay, this is the standard, and will not overinflate their expectations of the future value of their NFTs in that regard. So yeah, that's what we are doing. We're gonna start with lands, of course, and then expand it to other NFTs. But I think it's a key aspect in this current market, since as we see the prices of NFTs surging and going through the roof, it could lead to serious bubbles, and that's not good for the development of the ecosystem long term.
Yeah, yeah, bubbles are not good. It made me laugh a little bit when you referred to traditional DeFi, because right now so many people are just now beginning to understand, and it's still kind of at the fringe of finance. And where we are now, I mean, it's hard to lose. I mean, we're so early. I mean, okay, the amount of people, the amount of money in the world is huge. The amount of people that are into crypto is a tiny little box. The amount of people that are into DeFi is even tinier box. The amount of people that are into layer two finance is even tinier. And then now MetaFi is coming about. So, if you're just now getting to this, there's really no way to lose at this point, I don't think. But yeah, you referred to different land valuation. And you're starting with land. And yeah, that is a good place to start, because I do see other NFT valuation platforms out there, and they're trying to value like a CryptoPunk, or even just some other random JPEG. Land, I guess, has a little bit more objective process, and I see that you're kind of taking this traditional scenario of using comps, real estate comps, to apply it into the metaverse. So you're taking a traditional pattern and then bringing it in and transposing it to the metaverse. And would you say that the real estate comps is a pretty good parallel?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there are many variables that you can really use to create those price forecasts, and they're fairly accurate. I mean, we started with the sandbox. We're already rolling out like the alpha version of the algorithm. You can actually look it up,
Uh huh.
and you can just put the coordinates of your land, and we'll be able to get that price forecast. And you can go
I
on
saw that.
OpenSea and take a look at those offers for that. So yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So if you own land and you're curious about it, you can just plug in your coordinates, and bam, you have a valuation. And then you can put that on OpenSea or the NFT market, feeling pretty confident that you're asking a good price.
What we realized when we released the MVP, and we also kind of expected that, is that, obviously there's some people in such an inflated industry that, are not that happy that maybe their land is not as much worth as they thought, right? So that's something that you realize there, which was a good learning experience also from our side. But it's also something that, is some like where you kind of say, okay, on the one hand you have an algorithm which is neutral and analyzes, and on the other hand you have basically just emotions. And I think especially the NFT space is very much dictated by emotions, right? And this is where we
Yeah.
want to provide that layer of transparency, that layer of, let's say also fairness to everyone leveraging this. And also going back to the real estate aspect, it's funny that you mentioned, I mean, we're talking about retro real estate, sure, but this is also kind of how we started, right? We wanted to have kind of like a ecosystem to collaboratively curate, real estate in the metaverse in that sense, right? And then we realized the inefficiencies within this space and came up with the idea of the algorithm and the pricing oracle to actually help and enhance the respective, how do I put this, the respective industry, and therefore provide that layer of transparency, because we thought, okay, we cannot just start a DAO, raise funds, and then yeah, we just buy overpriced lands. This is not something that we want to do. We actually want to do it the
Yeah.
right way, and also the fair way, that will not only benefit some, let's say, Ethereum whales, right, but also retail investors that usually would not have a chance to take part of this industry. And this is really kind of what
Uh-huh.
we want to highlight, that, this is an important aspect to so everyone can be part of this industry, and there's not so much insider trading anymore, which is happening right now. I mean, we heard it from OpenSea, for instance, and other platforms where there was insider trading. I heard it from a lot of people in the space that told me, look, they were approached a lot of times to just make, random bids on NFTs to just inflate the price. And obviously, this is like back in like 2010 or even earlier, like how people were betting or playing around with eBay, right? And that's just not fair, and it's just going to benefit a few. And we want to help, foster, to make MetaFi and the financialization of the metaverse accessible for everyone.
No, yeah, there are actually some projects that offer NFT pricing. Actually, a handful of them, but in many cases they're not open at all. So it's like
Yeah.
if you want to get in, you have to be a selected investor pretty much, and then you will be able to get access to all the data that they're retrieving. But that's not the idea, right? The idea is to actually democratize the access to capital, and make it in a very transparent and inclusive way. And that is pretty much our main goal.
I've seen an app that allows you to look at different. They give you two different NFTs, the JPEG NFTs, the art, and they allow you to determine, which one you like better, and then you go through a series of them, and you can go through hundreds of them, and that's how they value their NFTs, and that's pretty good, But I do like the idea of you using something tried and true and traditional from the real estate market, and then applying it into the metaverse.
You also made a good point there, John, when you were talking about, we wanted to start actually with lands because, as you mentioned, right, they're more feasible to utilize than, let's say, true art, right, which is generally dominating the NFT space right now, right? We're talking about art, which is mostly driven by human emotions, where, I mean, it's just a bit harder to obviously value this. Obviously, this is something that we want to also approach, and we have this in our roadmap. Lands is something that it's just let's say more feasible, and it's a low hanging fruit kind of when it comes to NFTs and integrating them into DeFi.
Yeah, and to go actually back to the definition of MetaFi, I mean, we've been talking a lot about land, but it's a very wide spectrum. I think
Yeah.
there's unlimited possibilities on the things that you can do with MetaFi or in the metaverse, right? And applying finance to that. So one thing that I think is super interesting that hasn't been explored that much is using NFTs and unlocking the real potential of NFTs, right? Because of course, virtual lands are cool. They are pretty much like the groundworks for everything that is being developed on top of them. But and then we talk about collectibles. We talk about like some NBA players doing some basketball moves. But at the end of the day, the power of NFTs hasn't really been unlocked. I think you can put in an NFT whatever you want. I mean, it can be data, it can be time of your day, it could even be an accomplishment that you've made. And seeing those NFTs as badges that you pretty much gather for doing things in the metaverse or working or participating in DAOs is one of the like aspects that have the most potential in this market.
Yeah.
From my
So
perspective,
so you're
because at the
going
end,
down deep. You're going down deep into a whole new use case, and kind of almost a social graph type of use case. And I want to get there in a second, but I was listening to this podcast the other day on Bankless with I believe it was Chris Dixon of A16Z, and then the Bankless folks, and he was saying that when the telephone first started out, they had the telegraph. And really, the telegraph at the time was only being used by the railroads, and all they wanted to know was just steel valuation. So, yeah, that's a commodity like land. And so they would just do the telegraph. It was quick, easy. They get a quick little telegraph. So why would they have to go through all the process of all the connections and the long distance phone calls at the time to have to deal with voice calls when they could just use a telegraph, because it was very utilitarian based and everything like that. So right now it seems like you're entering into the metaverse with this very practical device of valuing land. But who knows where that could go beyond that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right. And you know, what an interesting use case that I'm always pushing is kind of also, like the dataverse in that sense, right? Because Camilo already touched on it a bit, right? That you can actually also leverage data, NFTs, for instance. Now the guys from Ocean are doing it right now. They're preparing the launch. If you didn't hear it from me, right? And other aspects where basically, the perpetual royalty models, which are quite easily possible within NFTs, can be very much efficiently applied to data, because obviously data is not always just coming from one source. There can be various sources of data. And if this data is then monetized and sold on, for instance, decentralized data marketplaces such as, the marketplace of Ocean Protocol, then basically you have this data which is monetized, which is sold, and obviously there's revenue generated, and this revenue can be automatically distributed to all the different sources. If we nowadays look at how data is monetized, right, it's coming from centralized entities. And this is why it's also something that I would like to highlight, that what Facebook is doing with the meta trend is this can also be dangerous to the data sovereignty of us, right? We already have these issues when it comes to Facebook, and we interact with Facebook, right, and how they leverage our data. We had the Cambridge Analytica scandal and all these aspects. And obviously the metaverse, where, let's say in the future, potentially 70, 80, 90% of business, human, and social interaction could take place. I'm not saying it will, but it could take place. Imagine all the data that is generated there. And if this data is in the hands of centralized entities, right, then yeah, we all know the story there, and then this what we've experienced so far. It was just the beginning, and therefore it's also crucial when we talk about MetaFi. First of all, that we look at it from the different angles and not solely the lens, of course, right? And secondly, that we also look at it from the decentralized angle. That actually, when we talk about the metaverse and leveraging assets, digital assets from the metaverse, that these are decentralized, so to say, or at least not the origin is necessarily decentralized, but at least the distribution and the entire protocol that they're leveraged on, right? And this is something that I feel like, especially with the reach that Facebook has, it can be a dangerous thing, because like there's now a lot of people getting into the metaverse. I'm being even approached the other day, I think, by my grandma. She was asking, what is the metaverse? In that sense, she read it somewhere in the news, right? So this shows like the metaverse is there, it's here to stay. And at times I think like that the metaverse could even be something that is it can foster mainstream adoption more than crypto itself, because any form of value in the metaverse is crypto in that sense. But crypto can be kind of too uninteresting for people at times, or it's just too financial in that sense. But the metaverse is something that's for everybody, and therefore the metaverse can also be a huge push into this direction. Therefore we have to be careful also from which direction this push is coming. And therefore I think highlighting kind of also the data aspect when it comes to MetaFi, or you could even say the data versus feeding MetaFi with further digital only assets. And that's also an aspect that I would definitely highlight when it comes to the space. And I definitely also would encourage everyone to leverage the decentralized metaverses and the assets thereof, and not so much the assets of decentralized players in this space.
Camilo, you have any thoughts on that, on the dataverse?
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Sorry, I thought you wanted to say.
I didn't want to go too deep into this.
I like
So I'm
that.
sorry.
From
But yeah.
DeFi to MetaFi to the metaverse to the dataverse.
So many buzzwords in one in one sentence.
A
No,
lot
but
of rabbit holes.
I think that's also super important, because I mean, at the end of the day, data is like the new oil, right? And since we are, as I already mentioned, so like spending so much time on the internet, we're generating a huge amount of data. So we have to be very wary on how we manage the data, and who gets a hold of it, right? I mean, we, as Nicole already mentioned, we had many issues with Facebook so far, and with other companies that just take our data and we just accept it, right? But I think the way Ocean is approaching this, by generating this permissionless, in a sense, and decentralized marketplace, where you can actually provide and unleash unlimited amount of data and make it accessible to everybody. I think that's one of the most important ways on how to approach that problem of of the data as a commodity, right? And so that's why we are really focused on pushing that. So we want to really, all the data that we generate from our algorithms, we really want to give it to the people, and the best way to do it is through the ocean marketplace, because it's a seamless way of doing it, right? Like you just, the data sets are a data token, and you can just buy the data token as like a normal Uniswap trade, right? It uses the same logic in that regard, and you can just pretty much Google, like look on the marketplace. Okay, I need to look for traffic information, or I want to see like weather forecast, and you will be able to access them and just purchase them directly from the source. So I think that's a very important aspect that needs to be and that will get lots of adoption in the next couple of years. Um, I don't know if you, John, have checked the marketplace, but you should definitely do.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the Ocean Protocol Marketplace. Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually went through their whole Ocean Protocol Academy, and yeah, I'm a big fan of Ocean Protocol and the whole decentralization of data, being able to buy and sell your own data on the marketplace without having to worry about large companies like Google or Facebook scooping it all up in front of you. So this brings into play though the social graph and the whole decentralized ID. And do you think that this will become a factor in the metaverse and in MetaFi and all that, as far as receiving possibly non-collateralized loans based upon reputation systems and stuff like that? And then, yeah,
Definitely. I mean, as I mentioned already, like with NFTs, you can really, on the one side, prove the ownership, but also you can prove when you acquired it, from which person you acquired it, and how long have you held that NFT, for instance, right? So, in a sense, you can use those and that information to actually generate a scoring system or a reputation system that you can leverage to do other things. So if we get to a point of adoption where this is accepted, it will be huge, because then you will be able to prove things, prove your reliability and credit worthiness in a new way, without having to fake anything, right? Like when you get a loan from a bank, of course, you need to bring like some bank statements and stuff like that. But it also depends. Like if they don't like you, they will not give you the credit, right? But with the cool thing about like the metaverse is you will have your identity, you will have your badges, and those badges will be accepted, and you will be able to do it in a permissionless way. So I think that's going to be, and it's going to play a huge role in the future.
Yeah, and maybe adding to this a bit, basically in regards to the badges, right? If you really think, if we really look at the future of work, for instance, right? At least we are strong believers that the future of work will also be decentralized, and therefore most people will, in some way or another, be contributors to DAOs, and that will be kind of the work. So it's kind of that freelance thing, right? We see it already amongst younger generations. People change their work more. People are fed up with decentralized models. With the hierarchy structures, people are fed up also with the typical money for time model, because you cannot really evaluate time in that sense, right? You can take 8 hours for a task that is super easy, or you can take 8 hours for 100 different tasks, right, which are very complex and difficult. And it's very hard to measure it at times, and therefore, if we really believe that the future of work also, and people generating income will be part of the open metaverse, right? Which is also something I would like to highlight, maybe from an education standpoint, that when we talk about the metaverse, it's not one metaverse to rule them all. It's the open metaverse, which has sub metaverses, so to say, which have different niches that they are approaching, right? Like the Sandbox is approaching gaming, Decentraland is approaching more, business and social interaction, and so on, right? But going back to the batch aspect, if we really believe that people will be more of DAO contributors, right, and that will be their work in that sense, And obviously, mostly DAOs are in some sort of way in the metaverse and metaverse communities. Then we need some sort of CV, right? In that sense, right? When you apply nowadays to a job in the traditional economy, you have a CV, which is a track record, which a lot of people are relying on, which is very, let's say, intransparent. It's a typical issues that blockchain can and will solve, right? Where there's intermediaries, it's a lot of paperwork and all that stuff. But obviously, when it comes to DAO contributors, you also want like some sort of reputation system, as you guys mentioned before too, that helps people to have like that on-chain CV in a sense, right? To show, okay, you can be anonymous, but you can still show your track record that you're a reliable person, that you've successfully contributed to various DAOs, and that you're, a positive DAO contributor, and therefore, obviously, let's say bounties within DAOs, and tasks should be more allocated to you maybe, and even at times, let's say you should have maybe even some sort of more influence when it comes to voting, because you are an experienced contributor. You have let's say the best, you have the spirit of the DAO, you have the positive influence in mind, right, that you want the positive impact when it comes to the DAO. And therefore, like, having that on-chain CV, which kind of transparently, so to say, stores all in the decentralized way, of course, and only accessible to you, every information and every, let's say, achievement, especially that you would make when it comes to interacting within DAOs as well as the metaverse, is a crucial aspect to also standardizing this industry, right? And to also allow people to actually grow, and really increase their reputation, in that sense, going back to the reputational models within this ecosystem. And this will then again foster the layer of trust, so to say, in a trustless environment. And I think that's a very crucial, so to say, aspect. I think there, obviously, again, NFTs play a crucial role. This will not necessarily be NFTs that have a monetary value per se, because it's individual achievements, but it's kind of more of a status symbol in that sense, right? And that's really one of the killer use cases that we see also when it comes to the NFTs, apart from let's say the collectible aspect or the lands, and maybe data NFTs and such.
And I think that's way more scalable, right? Because smart
Yeah.
contracts are super cool, but they always are linked to a UI and a front end, and you could have many issues with that. Like, you just need to make sure that
Yeah.
everything works perfectly fine, so you can interact with that smart contract, right? But with an NFT, you just have it in the wallet, right? ERC 721, you have it there, and you will be able to just connect your wallet and show it and showcase it much easier, right? Than having to make sure that the smart contract works. And I think that for developers, that's also super interesting, because then they will be able to really establish those NFT badges in a seamless way.
Yeah, it's amazing and it's mind blowing. So we're going well beyond the telegraph and the telephone, as far as use cases and just land valuation. We're going into social graph, social identity. Like, for instance, in LinkedIn profiles, I could see from in the future LinkedIn incorporating Web 3.0, in which you have to put in your wallet address so you can display your NFTs on your LinkedIn profile. If you're applying for a home loan or a car loan, you put in your wallet address so they can look up your NFTs and see your reputation and who you've been working for. For instance, I've been doing work in the AV Guild and for other podcasts, and I can show those POAPs to prove I was there. And yeah, it's MetaFi is going to whole new levels with the POAP and the NFTs and all this stuff. So yes, land is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, I mean that's always the case, right? When it comes to talking about crypto, and I know that this can be, if there's some listeners that are, let's say, just in the early stages of the rabbit hole, so to say, it can be a bit confusing. And I think that it has been like this for everyone that entered the space, where you're like, okay, there's this, that, and like, where should I start? It can be a bit like crazy, but this again also shows, the enormous potential that this all inherits. And um, interesting what you said in regards to the wallet. I fully agree with you that, in that sense, the wallet itself will be your identity, right? And also your metaverse identity, through which you can then again leverage MetaFi, because you can actually have these badges which have an influence on how you, for instance, receive loans with your NFTs in the MetaFi space, right? And then again, going back to the beginning, MetaFi is only a part of decentralized finance. And again, for instance, think of you positively interact with in MetaFi and receive a good reputation. And then again, you can go to a more institutional player within the space, and you can leverage this reputation that you obtain in the DAO metaverse space, and to again there interact with them in a more positive way. And then this can also add a layer of trust, so to say, for the CFI DeFi convergence, and also these players, institutions entering the space, and how you interact with them also in a decentralized environment. So this shows, like there's no end to the possibilities almost, and obviously we're very much at the beginning, and this all sounds, like sometimes you can get lost in talking about the opportunities, and obviously first of all they have to be built, and that's what we're doing. And here I think it's just crucial that you approach this from a gradual level, right? And that you actually build applications that are able to be used by anybody, right? People don't necessarily have to understand what an ERC20 or ERC721 or ERC1400 or even another token standard on another chain is, right? They just have to understand what the benefits are and how they can leverage it, right? And therefore, also from the land valuation tool, going back also what has been going live now, the MVP from the MGH DAO side, right? You can think of it just generally as something where you enter, let's say, the coordinates of your property. Based on this, an algorithm basically tells you how much is your property worth, right? And I'm speaking from the traditional real world terms in that sense, right? Imagine you have the coordinates of the location that, like, of a property that you own. You go to an algorithmic tool, you enter these coordinates, and then basically you are told how much is this property worth, other than having to go to, again, some intermediaries, an appraiser that has to value this land and charges you a fee, has a lot of paperwork. And then again, let's say 6 months later, the housing market crashes, and then it's not worth that much. And then you have to again go through this process, again have to go through paperwork, again have to pay fees, other than just going through a web app in that sense, or even at some point maybe a mobile app, where you just enter the coordinates and in real time you have the actual price of that property. And I think that's kind of the power that also MetaFi has. And also these kind of, like, apart from leveraging the logic of the traditional, the real world to the metaverse, which is one aspect, also kind of the benefits that we have there in the metaverse and the tools that we develop can then also be reapplied again to the real world in that sense, right? And I think that's then again,
Yeah.
a convergence between the metaverse and the real world, which is also something that Hold Protocol is doing, right? And I think that's also going to be like a crucial trend and aspect in the future.
Yeah, I
Camilo,
think
you have any
it's
thoughts on
it's
that?
it's it's about the seamless integration of all those technologies, right? And as I said before, we are in a pretty much digitally native society. So in future, there will be many ways on how to actually create value on the internet, and I think that's it's key. It's super early, and but I think that there's a bright future ahead in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah, and Gen Zers get this more than any other generation right now. Been born and raised in the metaverse in a way, and um, especially with everything that's been happening in the world with all the lockdowns and stuff, Gen Zers have really gotten appreciation for decentralized, non-top-down structures, horizontal structures, in which community really all gathers around and pools their resources and all governs together in DAO type scenarios. So, yeah. Uh, it, I'm a little older, so not many people really understand what the heck I'm talking about when it comes to this stuff. But that go ahead.
It's it as Nico mentioned before. I mean, the space moves so fast that we also get lost. Like people are already talking about like DeFi 2.0 and stuff, right? Like, and it goes
Yeah,
like this. So
yeah, yeah. They were talking about Maker DAO the other day on a podcast as legacy. Yeah. Olympus
Legacy.
DAO's coming in and doing, DeFi 2.0, and here we have MetaFi. So
Yeah,
it's absolutely
but
insane. We're going on 40 minutes. Geez, there's so much to cover. We still have plenty to talk about. A lot has happened since we did the first introduction to the Metaverse episode. So we've barely tapped into the MetaFi stuff, and I'm sure by the time we do in episode 3, there will be tons more to talk about. But I want to hear each of your final thoughts and where you think it's going to go.
I think where it's going to go.
hello.
It's going to be an impact that it has. It's going to have an impact on everything and everyone around us. And I think that any form of interaction that we typically are used to in the real world has been kind of already let's say transitioned to the digital world, right? Also, it's accelerated, of course, by the COVID pandemic and everything. And the trend is not stopping, right? We're still very much at the beginning. Let's say what also has to be said is interacting in the metaverse is still like let's say associated by a lot of bugs. It's lagging, and there's still a lot of enhancements and improvements we have to make. But if we approach this the right way, and going back also to what I said about what is the right way? It's a decentralized way. Then this is something that's going to reshape this society and can actually benefit everyone. And because it can really and truly have the impact where it doesn't matter anymore where you're born in the world, but everyone has equal opportunities. Kabir from Nunet, for instance, said it on my own podcast, which is not released yet, but I can already mention that statement, which I found interesting, is that decentralization means equal opportunities, not necessarily that everyone has the same, let's say, voting power and everything, right? Because it's just not possible. And also within a DAO, there needs to be some sort of structures. Fostering equal opportunities is really the power of decentralization, and this is then again something that the metaverse can provide, because you don't have to, let's say, grow up in the Silicon Valley or in San Francisco to then have the chance to work at the big tech companies, and only then, or be born somewhere else and have, let's say, wealthy parents, and then be able to go to a good school which allows you to join these tech companies. You can be anywhere in the world and just be talented and and especially also diligent, and then have these opportunities to leverage this economic power that is currently being built. And I think that's the beauty of this space.
Absolutely, man.
Nice.
And I mean, the internet is like a big swarm of people that are not organized at all, right? I mean, you have
Mm-hmm.
thousands of things, blogs and
Yeah.
websites, but we're really finding a way to actually coordinate, right? And generate
Yeah.
value from that. And I think that will it's just a game changer. It will just disrupt
Yeah.
the way we approach the internet. And so I'm super excited. That's what like really motivates me every day. It's crazy, and many people don't even know what's coming, right? So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Yeah. We are literally at a crossroads right now. Are we going to keep this decentralized? And it's our responsibility. It's our responsibility to help people navigate this space as early adopters versus letting the centralized entities come in and scoop everybody up and kind of put everybody in their little system in order to eliminate choices and capitalize all our resources and hard work that we're doing as individuals. So yes, we are at the crossroads. So yeah.
Let's keep pushing decentralization and
Yeah.
MetaFi, guys.
Yes. All right. Well, thanks again. And we'll see you on the flip side.
Thank you,
Looking
John.
forward. Thanks for the
With
invite,
the
John.
meat
Always
space.
a pleasure.
Have a good one.
All right. Bye.